Indeed, we find ourselves plunged into an ontological quagmire of global politicking and allegiances so tangled they defy even the most ardent geopolitical cartographers among us. The topic at hand, brethren and sistren of the Internet Coliseum, is none other than the riddle wrapped in an enigma wrapped in a shawarma of competing national loyalties. Is Russia pro-Palestine or not?
Israel is home to a core Russian Jewish population of 900,000 and an enlarged population of 1.5 million, including halakhically non-Jewish members of Jewish households, but excluding those who reside in Israel illegally. Remember what we talked about when I said, like, remember what I talked about when I said, like, Israel is a very Russian country? Yeah, that's like 15% of the population, bro. Now, the reason why this is funny is because Israel bombed a base in Syria that the Russian troops were positioned in. Are these Jews of Russian heritage or Russian Jews living in Israel? Both, but also a third thing that's even funnier, which is just Russians, like not Jewish, just Russians. Which is why it's even, which is why it's really funny. Let's just say Israel, not a very white nation, like by the standards of your eyeballs. I'm not using whiteness as a socio-political concept here. I'm saying like white as in like I would be white, you know what I mean? Like pale skin. But it still tries. It tries to white itself. Some of those initiatives yield results such as this one. So anyway, this is why it's really funny when Israel ends up blowing up a position in Syria that is a little too close to a base that Russian soldiers are operating out of. And then Russia turns around and says, you guys need to leave Israel. When Russia says you guys need to leave Israel, that means like Israel is going to have a massive population exodus. They're not going to leave anyway. But I suspect that it's a mistake that Israel will never repeat again. Many Russian oligarchs have Israeli citizenship and are actively evading sanctions because of it. Israel has also historically good ties with Russia and even Putin. Yes. Yeah, Russia is not going to attack Israel, dude. What do you mean? They're not going to attack more Russia. Oh, wait. Someone in my Discord was talking about how like Russia would never attack an area with like millions of ethnic Russians. And it reminded me of how Russia certainly didn't do that in eastern Ukraine. The only thing stopping Russia from attacking Israel right now is the fact that one, they have, you know, decent relationships. And also on top of that, yeah, Russia's gonna start doing a Donetsk in Israel. They're gonna be like, wow, we gotta denazify Israel. There's a lot of There's a lot of ethnic Russians that speak Russian. It's the third most popular language in Israel. We have to take it over. Sorry. That's what they're going to do. Yeah, the only thing that's actually stopping Russia from doing anything against Israel, aside from their trade relations, is suspected Israeli airstrike hits near Russian airbase accused of housing weapons in Syria. Is the fact that they're too busy with their own, which is funny because it's like, that's why I always laugh whenever I'm like, man, Russia's gonna help Iran and Russia's gonna help Lebanon and all this, all the like pro-Russia, pro-Palestine chatters, well, not even chatters in this community, but like people that chirp online are like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, do you not recognize that Russia's got his own to deal with? Anyway, they have to deal with the top of the hour ad break. Just kidding, they don't, because they're all using VPNs to watch me. If there are even any Russians in Russia that still watch after your government called me gay.
And to unfurl this political tangle, our host Hasanabi delves deep into the cauldron of contradictions, paradoxes, and historical baggage that define the geopolitical relationship between Russia, Israel, and the Palestinian territories. Picture it, a vast Russian diaspora residing comfortably within Israel's borders, a formidable block of Russian Jewish citizens, and even just straight-up Russians, no hyphen necessary. These individuals, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, constitute a demographic nucleus in Israel, lending the nation a distinctly Russified flavor. This population, like a hidden card in a magician's deck, complicates the equation significantly, for indeed, how does one champion Palestine openly while simultaneously overseeing a major population of one's own citizens living within Israeli borders? Herein lies the rub, my compatriots. Russia, for all its public proclamations and rhetorical maneuvering, must tiptoe across a tightrope suspended over a diplomatic abyss. On the one hand, Russia professes a solidarity with the Palestinian plight, voicing sympathy and aligning rhetorically with anti-Western and anti-imperialist sentiments. And yet, on the other, there lies the cold, unfeeling reality of pragmatism. Israel houses a staggering number of Russian nationals and citizens of Russian origin, some of whom wield economic and even political clout in their adopted homeland. One can almost hear the paradox echoing across the globe, bouncing from the Kremlin to the Knesset. Russia, the avowed ally of oppressed peoples and staunch critic of Western imperialism, finds itself bound in a curious complicity with Israel. How, then, could Russia justify an all-out support for Palestine when its own citizens form such an entrenched part of the Israeli demographic? Russia's position becomes an awkward ballet of backroom dealings, token proclamations, and strategic silences, a theatrical dance not unlike the political fandango one might witness at the United Nations. But let us not ignore the specter of economic pragmatism haunting this scenario. For Russian oligarchs, those modern-day boyars of boundless ambition and legally dubious wealth, have long enjoyed the sanctuary of Israeli citizenship to safeguard their assets, to slip through the cracks of international sanctions, and to stash their fortunes in tax-advantaged havens. So while Russia may wax poetic about Palestinian rights, the harsh truth is that it cannot afford to sever ties with a nation so deeply integrated into its own oligarchic structure. And herein, the geopolitical absurdity reaches its zenith. Russia, which prides itself on resisting Western imperialism and purports to stand in solidarity with beleaguered nations, finds itself tangled in a web of financial interest and diaspora loyalty that ties it inexorably to Israel. Thus, any calls for a pro-Palestine stance are met with a dismissive pragmatism, an acknowledgement that Russia's vested interests far outweigh its ideological sympathies. Imagine, if you will, the spectacle of Israel executing an airstrike near Russian troops stationed in Syria, a move that would seemingly provoke ire from Moscow, yet Russia's response is as muted as a whisper. Does Russia decry Israel's aggression with righteous indignation? No, my friends. Instead, it offers a tacit shrug, a nod, and a continuation of business as usual. The notion of Russia taking drastic action against Israel is as fanciful as a child's dream, for they share a symbiotic relationship built on mutual utility and political expediency. So, what of Russia's purported solidarity with Palestine? Hasanabi points out the farcical notion of Russia leaping to Palestine's aid in any meaningful way, given its entanglements with Israel. While Russia may cheer for Palestinian sovereignty in theory, it remains shackled to the pragmatics of its relationship with Israel. Putin, the stalwart czar of realpolitik, understands that his nation's influence in the region is best served by maintaining an amicable, if paradoxical, stance with Israel, however uneasy the alliance may seem on paper. And then there's the linguistic reality. Russian is the third most spoken language in Israel. Such linguistic saturation binds the two nations in a cultural intent that transcends simple diplomatic posturing. How, pray tell, could Russia rally to Palestine's cause with full-throated gusto when so much of Israel's population could claim Russian as their mother tongue? The ties that bind Russia and Israel run deeper than geopolitics. They are woven into the fabric of culture, language, and lineage. Let us then ask, what would happen if Russia, in a moment of fevered ambition, did declare itself ardently pro-Palestine? Would it not risk alienating its own citizens in Israel, to say nothing of the oligarchic wealth pipelines that snake through Tel Aviv like hidden rivers of gold? The hypothetical is as absurd as it is unlikely, and Hasanabi knows it well. Russia's pro-Palestinian posturing is, at best, performative, a hollow show of anti-imperialist sentiment draped over a core of pragmatic inaction. Indeed, any claim of Russian alignment with Palestine is at best symbolic, a gesture meant to curry favor with anti-Western allies while minimizing any real-world consequences. Russian support for Palestine is thus the equivalent of a lukewarm pat on the back, a "we wish you well" sentiment that dissolves in the face of actual geopolitical stakes. Russia's support for Palestine is as conditional as a mirage in the desert, ever shifting but ultimately insubstantial. And so, Hasanabi draws back the veil, exposing the geopolitical charade for what it is, a theater of empty promises, symbolic gestures, and diplomatic double-dealing. Russia may claim pro-Palestine sympathies, but these are nothing more than political pleasantries, offered with one hand while the other remains firmly in Israel's. The irony is as delicious as it is maddening, for we see a nation torn between ideology and self-interest, each whispering contradictory demands into Putin's ear. In conclusion, my friends, Russia's stance on Palestine is less a matter of conviction and more an exercise in rhetorical theater. The tightrope act continues, with Russia juggling allegiances as deftly as a circus performer. And there stands Hassan, our disillusioned yet insightful observer, watching as this geopolitical farce unfolds, shaking his head at the absurdity of it all. Russia, for all its declarations, is not truly pro-Palestine, it is simply pro-Russia. And in this tangled web of allegiances and self-interest, the fate of Palestine remains, tragically, little more than a pawn in a game it cannot control.